Thanks, Mike, for the introduction. So, for this 50% defense seminar, for this conversation with Pavlos, to whom I thank for his presence, we will focus on a recent piece called Campo Amniótico, and with the topics that it raises, this build upon feedback piece. First, I will just do a brief introduction to my doctoral project. The starting point, it is an ontology and a series of concepts of the Argentinian composer and researcher Horacio Baglione. So I chose this starting point of composable space, which is very suitable to approach electroacoustic and mixed music. Composable space, so understood as a playground of objects, interactions, and operations that are constructed on various superimposed planes, as you see in this graphic. So you have two very important words in this theory, which is objects, network, and operations that form an operational set. It is important to point out that the object here is understood not just as a merely sonic unit, but also as an active entity. So we can talk about a sound, but also about a piece of code, or a compositional operation, or a set of codes. So it's a very flexible and wide way to approach. So from that, in my work, I have a kind of a first part on which I am addressing my mixed and electronic production, approaching a lot using these categories and focusing mainly in the symbolic granulation techniques and on granular paradigm. But the idea is to interrogate these terms and to see if how they shift, or if it will shift, and how all these procedures from my electronics and mixed music are transversing onto the another set of works, which is my second part of the doctoral project, which is mainly intermediate works. So that is the general simplified overall approach to my doctoral project. Today, for this defense, we will focus, as I told, on a recent piece, Campo Amniótico, and on the research that is related to this piece.
So thank you very much, Fernando, for this brief introduction. Thanks very much to Mike Edward Edgerton for having invited me here. I feel like home. I was back here in 2019. I feel very honored to have to discuss with Fernando, who I have met in Strasbourg, in France, since 2016, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. And I had the chance to experience his collaborations with the ensemble L'Imaginaire at the time, led by another composer, Eric Maestri, and common friend. I was already quite impressed with what seems to be Fernando's ability to navigate very different territories in a sort of ludic and at the same time radical way. Very often in his compositional output, extremely profound political ideas emerge, but in ways which are far from a discursive or sort of polemical ambience, I would say. And then it's the sheer sort of breadth and wealth of his output, ranging, as he already mentioned, from electroacoustic, then mixed pieces, live electronics, up to intermedia, multimedia. So yeah, it's quite interesting that I can mention here one of the first pieces that were really sort of a turning point to my perception of his work. That was Ragtime from the Avoidance series in 2015. I had the chance to experience also with this ensemble L'Imaginaire. It's a trio, and I just felt really enthusiastic about the way he would work with citation, but in a very, very sort of deconstructive way, sort of undermining at all times the object of the citation, and somehow opening up ways of rethinking critique, radical political positioning, and playfulness. And I'm very glad to see this playground term also. I don't know if he has borrowed it from Vagione. Okay, then it's a very good opportunity to sort of transfer our ongoing discussions and arguments about quite a few subjects and hot topics, like from cognitive psychology and his aversion to it, from complexity, from what else? Of course, political discussions all the time coming up. But it's quite interesting, and I think it has a much wider epistemological meaning to say here that approaching those issues in this table would need some sort of common ground. And what I bring to this table is essentially my own role as a performer, musicologist, and technologist. As Mike already stressed, I have dealt a lot as a pianist with all sorts of complexity, starting with the more symbolic-based complex écriture, writing, up to what I consider the real essence of both symbolic and other forms of ecologically framed complexity. So basically musical performance as a complex dynamic system. And this is where I think we have a lot to discuss concerning his Campo Amniótico. Then I've dealt also a lot with the field known as embodied cognition, so the role of embodiment in our cognitive processes and creative processes. And this is, again, a very hot topic that we will be discussing. And last but not least, it's my preoccupation with human-computer interaction, with technology-enhanced learning, and how eventually those new technologies, interactive, and the idea of interactivity in general can be inscribed and used as an analytical tool for Fernando's work. So this graph already he showed from Orazio Vagione, the composable space, is an entry point to this sort of interactivity discussion.
Yes. So this one, thank you, Pavlos. Coming back, this graphic is from an article from people that I know from France, which is Alain Bonardi and Joao Swilinski. Okay. And about the quotation, I think that the quotation, is from Vajones, but I think it's in the same, I don't know if it's a kind of a sentence in that the translation is mine. I remember that they in French they use more the word field, but my choice was to use playground.
Okay, so it's
That is
your
my
choice. Okay.
that is my choice. Not the sentences, but the translation. Okay, so thank you. And yeah, the other thing is there is a lot of reasons because Pavlos is here. That is my choice, but one of the strongest is his field of expertise. So, which is embodied cognition and interaction, human-machine interaction. That is that is the why, and of course, it is related with the topics that raise Campo Amniótico. Okay, so of course the piece is mainly built upon feedback, audio feedback, which is also called Larsen effect because of his, not his discovery, but his first theorist, which is this Danish scientist Søren Absalon Larsen. Or feedback, as we know, is actually a loop between audio inputs and outputs, which could create this that we call positive feedback, which is when A is enhancing B and then B enhancing A, and in a chaotic and endless way, they start to multiply frequencies and the energy of these frequencies. And which arise also, and that is a very important topic, is for that is here, is that in any space that we are doing feedback, there will the frequency content, mainly the fundamental, is actually doubling the fundamental frequency of the room, of the place on which we are. That is very important for the things that will come after. As regarding his use, well, we know a lot how it's used in pop music, and mainly by guitar players, electric guitar players. I put just, I think my favorite ones, which is Hendrix and Robert Fripp, but of course, it's a vast field of people that are using it. And then in contemporary music, also there is a lot of people that use it. I am just quoting here 3 American composers that are Robert Ashley, of course, Alban Lucier, and Steve Reich, mainly his pendulum music, which is music for mics and speakers. We can also, I don't know, even Elian Radigue works a lot, of course, in non-real time, in different time, but I think that it was the main matter of his first works. Well, the list is long. I will just to point out some of the people who work with, and I'm not talking about a lot of people from improvisation who use it. So maybe we will just have also quickly the background of this piece. As you can see in the date, 2020 to 2022, that meant something. That it was a long compositional process on which we arrived to a final version, but it has the print of all this process on which every version was at the same time a piece and a prototype. Okay, and okay, I will just mainly say how I get to this particular piece. Campo Amniótico is a piece for 2 performers playing normally if cylindric instruments, woodwinds, but it could be any tube that we can change his length manually, okay? And the idea is that we put a microphone inside, an omnidirectional condenser microphone, and that there is a system that regulates feedback, okay? We will arrive. I am mentioning here some personal influence, direct influence in my work, and mainly my work related to feedback. One is Nicholas Collins, who works a lot with Alvin Lucier from several times, and who has developed his work. I think that the most part of his work is done with feedback. We can just talk about P-Soup, which is already classic on feedback, a very nice piece. But he also approached feedback in different ways, also by mapping the room with the feedback and using the mapped frequencies for instrumental writing. Also, there is Agostino Di Scipio, which is very different to Nicholas Collins. His approach is linked to ecosystemic systems, so self-regulated systems. And then there is also an Argentinian composer who is my age and also a friend, which is Santiago Diaz Fischer, who use also very different feedback, more in a sort of instrumental way, if we can say it fastly. So Campo Amniótico is not the first work on which I use feedback. I used it before. I think that I'm using it since 2015 or something. Well, I used it before that for make electronics parts, but in performance, in live performance, I think there is 2016. At the time I had done a duo for percussion and saxophone, and on which I use a lot a system with pedals, compression, and mobile speakers. So I think that the main background is that I was interested in have an instrumental feedback. So feedback which could use by performers, and that's I try to approach in several different ways. In this particular duo with the mobile speaker, I was notating mainly gesture and not results, of course, even if I had an idea of the possibility of the results. But of course, the main point that arises feedback is that it's unpredictable, and that we are composers, and that we pass a lot of time making scores, which are, I mean, the map of our ideas for the performers, the place of the symbolic, if we can say that. And so I use it also in other pieces on which there were also instruments and electronics, and there was also, I mean, feedback was another orchestrational tool, if we can say, another instrument. But I had since a lot of time the necessity of challenging me and try to arrive to do only feedback, only build it on feedback piece, instrumental feedback piece. And so when it was also with the Strasbourg ensemble that used to lead Eric, so they approached me for a new piece. We collaborate regularly. We are artistic partners and friends. And I told them that I was interested in some time to do a feedback piece, and we agreed in doing a flute and saxophone duo, which are both fascinating instruments for doing feedback. So it's in that way that it starts a very long trip with feedback, on which along of these 2 years, I was shaping the dispositive and the score. And it was also a new way of producing art, of art production. Because until now, the production regime on which I was, it was a kind of a standard contemporary music, on which of course there is interaction prior to the piece. But in this one, we can say that the process shifted a lot, and that they spend less time on my desk and more time testing, working, and using my body and the space, etc. Okay? So I will just do a little demonstration on how it works. The dispositive, you can see here just the technical sheet and the module in the patch who regulated this feedback. So we will open the max patch that regulated, and I hope that it will work. So here, as you can see, the module is is a sub patch, okay? Oh, shit, sorry. In this sub patch, it works very simply. I will explain it very fast. It's when the signal is arriving very fast. We have a measurement scale of dynamics here, who is going from 0 to 1, and it detects when it's going very fast to the maximum, and when it's the case, it subtracts volume on the signal. And also in the opposite, when the feedback maybe starts to very fast fade out, going to the minimal, so no volume at all, it reinjects an amount of volume. So that gives us regular and sustained feedback that the players control dynamically with pedals. Okay? So we have a constant feedback which is controlled, the dynamic shapes and rhythm with volume pedals. Okay?
And the length of the loops are the same?
Of which loops?
The feedback loops, because you say they repeat.
Yeah, that is part of the, I will arrive that to the score. The length of the loops is, yeah, there is a kind of a tal, yeah, so a unity of looping which is regular, yeah. It changed one or two times. Okay. Okay. So sometimes it can take some time in arrive, and so as you can see, when we change the size, can you erase a little bit the sounds? Thank you. Thank you. When you change the length of the tube, you change the frequency, not always. And it's not, of course, it's not predictable. That's the idea. And of course, there is a lot of different parameters that are influencing. A lot. My direction, how I move my body, humidity, the quantity of people in the room, etc., etc. But the idea is that we have an instrument that on which maybe we can say this bad word, his affordances are a little bit changed right now, because yeah, because we are not blowing on the instrument, we are just using our hands. Okay? So I ask, as you can say, when it starts to work regularly, you have a kind of a harmonic position sometimes, okay? But the question is that when you have a position and you think that this position will be steady and stable, well, no, it can change. It can change during time. Of course, it could be also that there is regular and recurrent frequencies, because there is the frequency of the room, main frequency of the room in which we are playing. Okay. But there is also other stuff, which is ring modulation. Sorry, I need to. Here. As you can say, this vibrati, this kind of vibrati is the ring modulation, and when we start to, this is controlled by low frequency oscillators, and when the frequency of these oscillators rise a lot, we start to having, of course, lateral glissandi bands. That is in the central part of the work. So that is the instrumental dispositive of the work, but then in the composition there are other things. There are also there is the feedback, there is the ring modulation, but there is also two synthetic voices which are reproducing the text of Bruce Naumann's work from I think from '85, whose name is Good Boy, Bad Boy, who has a particular characteristic, which is a kind of an iteration, regular iteration of words, and is shaped a little bit as in a list, and there is also looping. So it is not a casualty. Of course, I love that. I love this text, but of course, this kind of iterative quality that it has, it serves me a lot for my purposes. Okay? No, sorry, we don't have this. It's a long text, but sorry, I forget to reproduce the text. Maybe I will see it later. The thing with this text is that it's sharing the same outputs than instruments. So the volume of the text, of the output of the text, is also controlled by the volume pedals. So in the volume pedals, there is, of course, a switch, a potentiometer that allows you to have a minimal sound. So when you are in the lowest position, you can have silence, or you can have a little bit of sound. In this piece, I left a minimal, an audible minimal. So we have a kind of sustained tone all the time. And the thing that I'm writing is dynamic envelopes, actually. So the actions for the pedals on which they are raising the volume and making emerge the feedback as his volume. And if it's the case, the chunk of the speech that is at this particular time. We will come back to this system because it's also central to the work. So the genesis of Campo Amniótico, it was actually this all these things that I just talked about. They led me to this idea of doing this feedback piece. But when I take the decision to do it, that was just a decision. I didn't imagine that the process, it will be so important to me, and that it will, I don't know if it's changed, but at least enlighten a lot, not just from my compositional preoccupations are inside, but the actual physical process of composition, the times on which we produce, the time regimes on which we produce, they change a lot. So I spend less time on my desk and more time testing and playing and meeting and also talking, because I had tested different system for controlling feedback. I started with simple compression and multiband equalization and filtering, of course, because of course there is ways of changing and also avoiding this recurrence of the fundamental frequency, which are used normally in all this microphony technology in order to avoid feedback, which is this notch filters on which we will just silence this chunk of the frequency, the fundamental frequency of the room. We are shifting it. Well, these systems were very nice. I had a lot of kind of multiphonic sounds on the instruments, very nice kind of multiphonic sounds, electronic, but it was also very dangerous, because at every time that, of course, that we change, it was changing, and we couldn't really control the volume, which was the main problem. It was controlling the volume. I imagine, because while playing, there is also some phenomena, but they are not recurring, or they are so complex that I couldn't, but on which we can manually stop the feedback by using just when you are using just compression and not this system that I use. So it becomes very complex and very chaotic. I use a lot of the sounds that I recorded, but after the first, that was more or less a different layers of this system arrived to his premiere, which was in Pinerolo, in an Italian festival near Torino. And for this premiere, I used this system, and it was very, very accidental premiere, actually. And also when you are coming back very fast, and we were also coming out from the pandemics, so it was a particular moment when you are coming back to your normal production regime. You have not too much time to interact with instrumental players. You have just a few hours with the whole, and you must be very effective. So this kind of work, it just doesn't fit this production regime. But at the same time, of course, I wasn't happy, so I start to dig a little bit out. I knew by talking with friends and seeing a lot on Nicholas Collins, because he's very generous and he gives the patches. He doesn't, of course, shows how, because everybody has to do his own system and approach feedback, because that is part of your compositional work. This technical part. And normally in composition, composers have this kind of division between technique and creation, on which, and because of there is an institutional way of working with that, on which, yeah, we reproduce still a kind of Fordist models of production, on which we are dividing parts of a chain. I think this approach is impossible for this kind of work. And I heard that Nicholas Collins was doing something as real-time envelope shifting, which sounds very good. So when the envelope is going very fast, you reverse the envelope, and so he re-injected. But of course, I never couldn't really reproduce it. I searched and searched and searched, and my solutions were too complex and not very effective for my own desire, because I have a precise idea. I wanted a sustained feedback instrumental. And so I talked with a friend, which is computer genius, which is Andrea Agostini, which is one of the creators of Bach. And he guides me. He helped me in order to get a very simple, well, not simple, but yeah, very effective one. module of feedback control. So that was when I arrived to the last string of versions, okay? And when we play it, we will address that. Well, it's a process on which I will just maybe say this word to just advance, a process of acceptance, okay? Because we are seeking a lot to reproduce these multiphonic kind sounds, very beautiful sounds. We seek beauty of the sounds because we are musicians and we are raised like that. But it doesn't work like that. Sometimes there is just a plain sinus, idiotic, that we are saying, what I can do with this sound as a composer. I don't have a lot of chances of ways the writing there. And of course, the performers were very frustrated, you know, because they were playing and saying, "Wow, this sound is awesome," but I just changed my position, and there is no more sound. I have this, so I reach a kind of a transcendental state on which I say to me, "Okay, I understand right now. The material is that, and I have to shape dynamics." That is my main ground of composition, of writing. Of course, the compositional process is way more complex and includes a lot of other things which are in difference with other pieces, traditional mixed music. We are shifting the place of composition towards of composing interactions, composing the dispositive. So the conception of the dispositive is the first or main act of composition in this piece. So imagine the dispositive, work with the dispositive, and try to create an ambience on which we can give a playground of interactions to the performers. And that sounds kind of hermetical at the beginning. I mean, far away from our education, very far away. So I will show the first examples. You are also free to, whenever you want to jump. I'm still on the presentation, but it's okay. We will see a little teaser of the piece that we have made in Villa Medicis last year.
Le pregunto si así se ve bien, si se ve bien así le dejamos.
Playing a plastic trombone.
O sea, si es tan aleatorio como ayer, lo que podemos hacer es más o menos seguir el solfeo y que las notas van a ser un poco más bien un solfeo rítmico más que aquí ya empezamos a hacer menos, porque todo esto lo hacemos legal.
Entonces solamente posiciones.
Posiciones. Entonces ahí es donde nos perdemos porque no está el cue.
No tenemos el cue.
No tenemos el cue.
Pero aquí tenemos cue.
Sí, claro.
Entonces,
hay una especie de
This time was a nice sound. Yes, and then well, we have a second one which is very short, and this one is in Geneva, so in other room.
We were good boys. That was good. We don't want to die.
After the Villa Medicis? No,
No,
before.
That
Yeah,
was prior.
Okay.
So you can see that the dispositive, some things of the writing and the levels
It's
and
much
the
more
voice.
sophisticated in a certain way.
Yeah, so it's changing because I mean, it felt too electronic to me, to live electronics, and the idea is to try to work with this mechanical acoustic feedback. So our conversation with
Yeah.
us. So I already mentioned all these topics.
Mm-hmm.
So there is the title. We are composing with a chaotic and unpredictable matter. So
Mhm.
where is the writing there?
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking from the composer point of view. Well, as I told at the beginning, the centrality of the compositional act it shifts toward the conception of the dispositive and the idea of composing the interactions within this dispositive. Okay. The mere definition of the dispositive in this piece is already critical because everything is dispositive at the end because it comprehends, of course, the physical instruments, the it's not sounding.
Mic. Yeah.
Ah, sorry. Yeah, maybe my mic is disconnected.
Maybe you.
Yeah, I
Maybe
sorry.
turn it off.
Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry. So, as I will tell you, the dispositive is, of course, the physical objects, but it's also the room and mainly the performance body also. And so our process of composition right now is focused on how the interactions could work. And so, in this case, so I'm more composing a framework, and I'm trying to work with few parameters which will be central to that, and we will come back to that because these central parameters as that defines a lot of things. So the definitive tempo of the piece, actually, which is there is a reference, but it can fluctuate because there is, of course, the response of every whole, of every dispositive, which is changing. And so also the time, the latency and the time on which the sound will emerge, and all that it will define in situ the velocity and also the final duration of the envelopes. Because I use kind of a regular notation on which I'm just putting the rhythms on which the pedal is actioning, but there is a kind of agogical freedom on it, okay? Agogic is to be also situated.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So all rooms are very acoustics.
Yes.
So do you go into the space and you measure the different modes that exist in different locations in the room? Or
No, it's empirical. I mean, it's empirical. We have, of course, I have a module on which I can, a notch filter on which I can shift if there is a recurrent frequency which is not allowed in other frequencies to come out. No, I'm not doing an acoustical study of that.
So it's just your ear trial and error?
Yes, yes. It's our ears. It's not just mine. It's that the thing is that we are deciding, all the three of us. And of course, it raises a lot of questions. Is for that my research, it is with Mauricio, which is one of the performers, which is also a researcher, because the composer point of view and the performer point of view start to, I mean, the frontiers start to blur a little bit. And that's great to me. Huh? I really like it because we are involved in defining points, and I leave the performers to take decisions. And my ideal, I mean, the thing which is a work in progress is maybe the thing of working with feedback, merely with feedback. Right now I will wait a little bit because it was very tiring, this process of 2 years of working with feedback. And when you are rehearsing with feedback, it's very tiring. We had to do, of course, pauses because it's physically it's very improving. It's very improving to our bodies. And I don't want that music becomes a way of torture in a way. So we are shaping that, and I have kind of an ideal, which is just an ideal, but in the ideal maybe there is even no score, or the score is not like that, or the score is also to be situated in real time at the place, and maybe there is the dispositive, the device, and instructions. I don't know. Maybe. It arises also the question of the work sameness. Because of course, the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven could be played in this place or in this place for a professional orchestra, or it will change, but there will be a threshold on which we recognize that is Beethoven Fifth Symphony. Of course, there is difference, but in this piece, there is a lot of things that change a lot from one to another version. So it arises this question, and why I say that it was an acceptance process. Acceptance process to me that I got that it wasn't about sound, about the beauty of sounds, about this, because it's very easy to get lost in a kind of an hedonistic way of. It's so nice when you are trying and you see all this complexity in a place. But that wasn't the idea of an artistic work. It is a little painful process, but it's a process. And it's this acceptance because we must to deal with frustration. And you feel as a performer there. I was changing also sometimes the rate of the frequency of the LFO. I'm not a performer. I'm a third performer behind scenes, if you want, but I had the same sensations. But the difference is that I got these sensations prior to them, because I have another premiere with all these sensations. So I knew that in a way it was hard, because we are, of course, sometimes you have just two sinus. There is the same, and it sounds like 2 minutes of these sounds. It wasn't easy in the beginning, so it was also a path of deconstruct my own history in a way, and to arise.
All right. I think we got a pretty vivid idea of your compositional process and some of the results. We had the pleasure to have you share with us. I would like to mostly underline some dialectical tensions which you mostly mentioned, but I find them quite interesting for further work. The first is this economy of labor sort of thing, which we have to say it's nothing new because, for example, the School of Experimentation in the West Coast of the United States and pioneers of electronic music used to always have a more DIY approach and aesthetics as opposed to the distinction of roles at European institutions like IRCAM, for example, where you have the composer and the technician. So, but I find it quite interesting the way you frame it, like the way you want to go back to primordial sort of basics, the backbones of composition. I liked very much the amount of time you took to explore the instrument in front of us. It was quite clear to me that you were enjoying what you were doing, maybe even a bit more than necessary for this presentation. But this is, again, an indication that the playground sort of experimentation, I would say, aesthetics and this idea of composing interaction, so putting in place not only symbolic but also physical elements, is there at full work. Now, the tensions I was talking about, though, are alive and kicking, are very existent. For example, the presence of a musical score which gives us a fixed timeline, no matter how elastic this timeline might be in performance, is in direct contradiction to all the sort of openness and unpredictability eventually you want to get from the piece. So this is a basic conceptual problem, not in the sense of problem to be solved, but an aporia, you know, it's somewhere you need to not necessarily give an answer, but you need to address that. And of course, you mentioned that maybe there could be no score, but then again, that begs the question of other forms of representation, because you do create an experience, a very, very physical, embodied, in space, situated experience. You do have certain unpredictable effects. I'm not sure I would agree with saying that I don't know if it's the same anymore, because actually you do have many elements which remain the same, like the musical score, the instruments remain the same. Of course, the room changes, but the performers are pretty much the same. And the performers are also very, very, still, even if they have sabotaged their usual ways of interacting with a musical score, they said at some point, it was quite impressive in the video of the Villa Medicis, we get lost because we don't have a cue. And I like that a lot, because, you know, it's like bringing all the baggage from a classical music performer back to a situation which you have strived to make really an alien sort of animal. So there, you do have lots of elements which are fixed eventually. And that begs the question, then another point about that is the adaptive system you have created to keep the feedback constant. What about if that was out of the equation, no adaptive system and an openness to the real chaotic, you know, raw sort of primordial feedback situation, just an idea. But then all that begs the question, if someone says composing with interaction, and that actually turns into a mainstream direction, I have to cite here a very recent book by Marie Ballman, by the same title, exactly, Composing Interactions and Composing Mappings between Elements. And there one finds exciting ideas about the codification and not only the implementation of those things. Also, I have to cite a book by someone like Thor Magnusson, Sonic Writing, whereby we also sort of go beyond the idea of symbolic writing or writing as something else. So my question to you would be like, what are the ways that you go back to representation, codification, the symbolic, because you are a composer at the end of the day. You have not abolished your agency. The same applies to the performers. The performers, no matter what they might be doing, they have not abolished their agency in this thing.
Yeah,
We don't
yeah.
have a playground. We don't have a totally unpredictable space. We do have a dynamic system,
Yes.
but dynamic systems have state spaces, have variables, can be mapped
Yes.
to certain, degrees of
Of course.
scrutiny and detail. And I want to see, because at the moment you're still really at the playground phase, but what would be the next step in this, in what I conceive as a work in progress, in really,
Yeah.
going to the direction of representing, of recomposing, composing not on paper, maybe you use other media, I don't know what, but
I use paper.
but sort of making the interaction concrete, making the unpredictable not predictable but palpable somehow.
Yeah. Well,
That's
yeah.
my first
Okay.
question.
Okay. Regarding this question, I just wrote composing with the unpredictable. I'm not representing the unpredictable. So I'm dealing with the unpredictable. That doesn't mean that I wanted to give to the audience that. And other thing, Campo Amniótico is one possible answer to this, all this field of problematics that raised working with this unpredictable material. I had, of course, test other solutions. When I say other solution, is not having the regular feedback and just use it more like in a traditional way as an electric guitar. So just noting the passage between on which the microphone and the speaker will occur.
Kind of tablature, you mean? Or
Yeah, or notation of gestures. It could be symbolized. It could be conceptualized. So that it just verbalized with a set of instructions, of course. You tell him there is this contradiction that I must to address. I'm a composer. As a researcher, a contradiction you address it in order to resolve it. As a composer, a contradiction could be a fertile playground, and maybe you don't want to resolve that. You want just, as a composer, a contradiction could be a fertile field. So when you have things that you are telling you one thing, but maybe the reality is other, and in this gap, there is things that occur. I saw this question.
yeah, but there is an epistemic content in that which is important, and I think this is like, out of this contradiction we can learn something about, you can learn something more about composition, the compositional process. We as researchers, as an audience, as performers, potentially, we can learn more about these chaotic effects, this scenario, and we can formalize them in certain ways, and that's what I mean, that you need to address it. I don't mean that you need to, that you can go further than that, and you can...
No, it's the idea is for that, I say the work in progress is me working with feedback or with unpredictable material. Not this piece, and of course that I will come back. I need some time. As I told you, it was very exhausting process, this one. The thing that you mentioned it is the comeback to the symbolic, the comeback to the paper, to the...
No, but
how
it could be symbolic, it could be a flow diagram of interactions or a state space like in chaos theory, but it could be something completely different that you would need. I would say it's the comeback to representation.
To representation, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, that's a question on that point, because I'm wondering about the notion of having a goal in an unpredictable intent. Is that contradiction?
No, as I told, I am composing with the unpredictable. It's not the goal, the unpredictable, but yeah. And the thing that he points out, as you are pointing out, of create a timeline.
Yeah, there's the timeline.
There is
it's like a straitjacket in this case, You want to be free, but you have a straitjacket of a score and the timeline.
My question is, are they compatible, a goal and unpredictability?
I don't think so. I mean, we are dealing even with not. It's not you are not playing with feedback. We are dealing. I mean, reality is unpredictable in a lot of ways. It's more the question that he arises. I think that's how we are. How we are. Well, in this case, he says representing our ideas in order to give to the performers or to perform ourselves. I don't know. Yeah, of course. It's for that I say there is a process, and I will not maybe use the word free or being free. I don't know the meaning on the context, but of course that I see that there is this. I saw this contradiction, and I saw. To myself, I told me, well, I have an history, and it's still strong, and the main thing with that and with composition, to my point of view, is time, and how we organize time, how we count it in my particular neurosis, which I have this kind of tick of counting time, and that it comes also for a kind of a post-structuralist education that I have, because education in music. I'm saying when we say
a post-structuralist education in music. What's that? I want to go and enroll for that.
Okay, just right. Yeah, the thing of thinking on parameters. The parameter thinking.
Why is that post-structural and not structural? That's structural by default.
Yeah, if you want. I maybe was meant in maybe post-serialist, if you want, but linked to that. I mean, I was raised, or I learned a lot of my métier, of my savoir-faire, by studying a lot of compositions and composers, but I study a lot of Lachenmann, a lot of spectralism, so I was used to count time and to deal with processes which were measured, okay, and to deal with profiles and with morphology and with variation or proliferation or stuff. But as you told you, I didn't abolish my agency. But of course, it has a lot of consequences on my. I will say before that I say my regular activity, my standard, my old activity, but to my activity in general, of course that it has. The question of representing all that is an ongoing, I think, to my grave question, no? It will never stop. And the interesting part to me as a composer is not just dealing with that, it's addressing, is making mistakes, and having contradiction and so forth, but it's a chunk of the work on which sometimes we are addressing it directly and sometimes we are not addressing it in composition. But the comeback from this piece was very hard. The piece that you heard in France that I premiered in September was the first non-transmedial, non-prototypical as a prototypal piece. It was not a video, it was not a electronic piece. I mean, the first mixed piece was with video, but with instruments and electronics, it took me almost a year or 9 months to do 50 minutes. When the year prior to that, my production
15, you mean, not 50?
15, yeah, 15, sorry. Yeah, 9 minutes.
It would have been quite fast, actually.
No, yeah. 9 months for 15 minutes, it could be, sometimes it could be take more, but if I contrast that with the year prior to that, on which my explosion, well, it was also the pandemic. There were so many different...
the pandemic as an amniotic
yeah.
basically.
It was actually the pandemic, the amniotic field, and it was in residence, so my production explode. I just compose not just
Okay.
a lot, but very different media-based pieces. And so my comeback to my regular and to representation was, and I'm saying just the emotional point of view, very difficult. Very, very difficult.
Yeah, it makes sense because really here you are entering into some new territory, and that's quite clear. But
Yeah.
that's why it becomes interesting. Another question is, I feel that your work with the performers, like, was the performers' process quite similar to yours? Because the way you describe your positioning is as if you are sabotaging your own, you are short-circuiting your own automatisms, similarly to the way you do with the performers. How did they perceive it? So what do you expect from the performer in this situation? Is it just, you know, experimenting and listening and sort of activating an action perception loop, which is somehow a bit more, has a sort of lower resolution than the high resolution we need to play sort of virtuosic music?
No.
Or is it some other sort of virtuosity you want to emerge out of this process eventually? And what's the somehow, I don't know, in those two videos, I might be terribly wrong, but the listening process of the performer wasn't palpable for me, wasn't perceptible. I don't know why. Maybe I'm to blame for that, but I didn't perceive it somehow. I thought they were just reading, you know, the notes, and they were not really listening for things.
Well, there is a
or
there is a 30 seconds extract, the thing that you
I
said.
know, but it's still the extract you chose to
Yeah,
represent
of course,
the
but
work.
I chose it because
Come
of the words that you raise up. They are saying these things.
Mhm.
We are getting lost. We don't have
Yeah.
have cue there.
Yeah,
We must to decide that.
yeah.
They are in this particular video. They are calm. In
Mhm.
other situations, they weren't. But it wasn't.
Mhm.
There was.
So there is some stress and some tension involved there. It's not this idyllic
was-
sort
it
of
emerged-
Walden-like, Thoreau-like
no. I didn't have.
enjoyment of nature, right?
No. I didn't have a conscious expectations on performance. Actually, it rise.
Because it makes
wasn't
the
conscious.
question what you want from the performer. Actually,
Of course.
because you put the performers in a very weird situation here. As a performer, I feel it would have been quite uncomfortable for me, actually, to have to follow a score like that, which is
It's
no matter how
very-
simple, you know, and coordinate with another person and have these intersubjective
Yeah,
dynamics, and
it's-
at the same time have
course.
this sort of, oh, now we forget about everything, and you know, we
I
start
I never say that we forget about everything.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm saying is that in the process, all these questions arise, and of course, there was difference on how we live between composer and performer, but I wasn't thinking I'm a composer. We expect of the performers that normally that they play. We sometimes even, I don't say that they eliminate, but we are not very democratic about your agency. It depends on every players, but I mean, we know, of course, there is agency. I always wait for an interpretation. That means agogic, that means a lot of different things, of course. But when I'm writing, when I'm composing, it's not that I am thinking about how the performance will feel, or you think practically in this case, no?
No. I don't think only
No,
practically.
the composer, no,
Okay,
composer.
let me help you a bit more
Yeah.
with that. I'm thinking more like ontologically, really. Like, do you want the performer to be lost in the woods and to be part of
No.
to be part of the ensemble of physical elements and technological elements that make it a piece?
Yes.
Because you said you compose the interactions and you have this agent there, but this agent obviously has much less
Agency.
room for
Yeah. Essentially. Yeah.
So-
Yes. So
they become sort of objectified, right, in a certain way. I mean, what's the interpretation you accept?
No,
You expect from.
yeah. I mean, there is. It could be extendable to a lot of things, saying that the performer could be objectivized. In this case, I had the conscience that it was a path, and it has a kind of a ritualistic or transcendental outcome on the path. It's for that I talk about acceptance. And yeah, there was the expectation that we will shift our position, and as you say also, the margin of our agency, because also my agency was very limited, of course. So that was the idea, but my intentions in that size emerged after. When I start to say, okay, I have done IRCAM courses, and then you are used, well, that is too general, but in my case, I was pointing real-time electronics or sometimes fixed, but the interaction human-machine was very fixed. Everything was notated. And of course, there was the room is for that. We use live electronics for interpretation. So how to interpret the score, so the symbolic part. But in this case, yeah, I think that after that, I told me I am trying to do something in which the relationship with technology and with the instrument, with the tools of technology, is it's less reactive, it's harsh, and is limiting a lot our field, but at the same time, it gives you a kind of insight or introspective stuff, because of course there is part of the piece on which is very difficult to hear which is your voice. There is a stereo piece, no? So there is one to the left, one to the right, and they could have regarding the size of the hall, monitors, and you have you are near to your speaker, but it's really not easy in the beginning of the piece when you have these rarefied events. It's easier. You have the timeline. You can more or less count, being true. But when they start to have the 5 positions that are sounding more and more in time and occupying more place in time, it becomes more difficult, because you have also the lateral advance of the amplitude modulation. In this process, of course, I start to clean some of the stuff and clarify, and you have the voices that start to be more present, even if they are in the background. So there is a lot, and you don't have, your ears are perturbed. I mean, there is a perturbation of that, and
saturation, you mean, or
perturbation. Your perception is difficult to hear what are you playing. So in the central part of the piece, and you don't have, when you are, I don't know, playing a tutti with a lot of instruments and everybody is playing loud. Maybe you feel your instrument, but the overall sound is difficult to distinguish. But you have your body and your gestures that you learn for several years, and you can grip on that. Here, no.
They do. They are cueing and they're using pedals.
Yeah.
Of course you do. I mean, they do it. They have a feedback. I mean, haptic feedback from the instrument. They have everything. There is a perception loop.
Yeah, but the sensory motor.
But listening is not.
Yeah, but that.
So
that perturbs your normally acquired sensory motor prediction that you have. It's not the same. Of course that you have your agency. Yeah, of course you have. I'm sorry, I'm exaggerating if you want. But it's not the same.
Oh no.
Your years of studying is not the same. You must do. For that, I say there is frustration and there is acceptance, because all that there is a lot of parameters that and main parameters that are to be situated. Well, every score, of course, is to be situated, but you have a lot more of clues. Here, when you arrive, you rehearsal, but even when after the rehearsal, the room is full of people. So the response, the haptic feedback of the response is changing also. So you
have
are
something to
dealing
say.
with uncertainty. Oh, sorry.
I have something to say here, but let's open to
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
our
I wanna
audience.
follow up on what Pavlos was saying.
Yeah.
In an unpredictable situation in which you have the two performers who are playing with the feedback systems,
Yeah.
are there any outputs that are not allowed?
Well, yes, because there is a
Good. And
there is a field.
what would an example of one be?
I could be exaggerating saying that they cannot throw the instrument and against the wall. Or of course, there is a set of actions. No, it could be that in the process there is some things that maybe I will change if there is a recurrence of one frequency which doesn't happen. But it could happen that in some moments you have these 5 positions that you are seeking that they are 5 so it's 5 fingerings that could change because they maybe during the process of the piece they react differently. But you are trying to grip to these fingerings if you want. And sometimes maybe there is too much of a recurrence frequency which erase every difference between the
Because I think that's kind of part of what Pavlos was getting at a little bit.
yeah, of course. So that's what the composing part we address also. There is other topics. Maybe I will just continue with a little comparative example. So that is the beginning when we played here in Malmö last year. And that is the same part in Geneva and a concert just after this one.
Mhm. Was there ring modulation before?
No,
Here there is.
that's feedback.
That's only feedback?
Yeah. Okay. And I use ring modulation because there is a recurrent, well, that is a phenomenon who came back a lot is battimenti. This vibrato that happens is for that that I start to use. But you saw my scores, you also saw my scores. To me, writing that and leave it like that was very traumatic the first time. Very traumatic. The wideness of the score was really, really different, really difficult to accept that the score has just that. Well, there is also other parameters that we play. They are there. Is the legato part or not, which means the transitions between the pedals and how deep is the in the first part they are just slightly and then they start to go further and further on the margin that they have. So we can arrive to this part. We have already addressed it. Yeah, there is as you say, there is a temporal line. How is the limit how is the limit of setting that? Because if you are doing something on which it means that you will gather people together and offer something to hear or to see, you are just setting a situation. And even if it's indefined, you are setting also kind of a time frame. Because you are not saying we will meet one day, I don't know, and it will finish in a moment. But there is, of course, a frame of time, and this time, and you pointed out, and I told you, that is, yeah, maybe a reminiscence of my This is part of the path, no?
But it's not only the frame, it's that you organize this time, right? There is a
Of
form to the
course.
piece,
Of
if I'm
course.
not wrong. And
Of course,
maybe
of
you
course.
could talk about the development of this form, because I don't remember if you have addressed that. Huh?
No, yeah, there is a form. The form was even an excuse. Given that for a composer it's a strong word, use the term form, and in mine in particular, because I am one of my main concerns is time scales and exploring different time scales, and that is the reason of that I'm working with Horacio's. Yeah, because of the granular paradigm, because I am addressing micro scales of time with electronics and meso and macro scale times.
So how does that translate in this case?
Well, in this case, there is
there
is no micro. Well, there is always micro because there is electronic, but it's not addressed, it's not controlled. The thing is, there is two different time regimes, if we can say, because we have this chronometric straight jacket time. Well, both are, if you want, in some point, which is the time of voices, because of the recording of the voices is a fixed recording and fixed.
Yeah, but they control it with the pedals.
Yeah, but the voices are coming out from in the same channel. Then, so every performer control his own voice. So it's two different files, and so the voices have this temporality. And in the first parts, we will hear it really in a foreground when they are coincident with the feedback part. But as I told you, the tempo of the feedback part and the duration of the envelopes could change. So sometimes in some parts you hear a sentence or a part, or sometimes nothing in the first part, or you hear it very in the background. And sometimes, but in the middle part on which there is a lot of activity, so there is no more halt.
So there is a middle part.
There is a middle
there
part,
is
of
a
course. There is a center.
Macro.
There is a sort of.
So you have organized time.
I had organized time, of course.
Okay. Just
Of
making
course,
sure.
I never say that I no organizing. You put some words in my mouth that
No,
I never say.
not at all. I'm trying to
I
understand.
never say that there was a free time. No. I am saying that there is a ritualistic and yeah, it's kind of an initiation rite, right? In sometimes, but you have this chronometric time because the voices are ineluctable with the. And there is the situated time of feedback.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. It's so interesting that we are
What's the time frame here?
What's the time
Since
frame?
We're talking about time frames.
Yeah, there is a time frame.
And
Well, I had different, comparative examples on how it works in ones and in other. Maybe. Well, I think that we already addressed also all that. That is because the idea of the research upon this piece is having these different point of views of all this painful process sometimes between us.
Since we're talking about time frames, sorry to interrupt. It's 2:30 now.
Yeah.
And usually these things go for 2 hours. So we can do as you wish, but if people want to ask questions,
Yeah.
maybe we could open that up for now. And then we just take it until people are tired.
Yeah, we're going to even finish already.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Still.
Should I maybe start, and then I can see that there are 3 people or at least 2 extra people in the Zoom. Maybe if they want to, do you have some way for them to communicate?
Yeah, they can communicate. I think in the chat, of the Zoom. So if somebody have a question, you can just write it down in the chat, and we will address it.
And then maybe in the interim, while they're typing, I can
Yeah.
hop in.
Yes, please.
So thank you. It's been an interesting discussion, and it's lovely to hear
Wait, they will give you a mic.
Oh,
Watch out with the feedback.
so that they can hear. I perhaps want to start on the end where you were vocalizing. Of course, you have interpreter and trouble as a phrase there, but being an interpreter that has sort of been having already done these things where you are reconfigured within a system and so on, and gone through these processes. But what you were describing about your incredible uncomfortability about the score that you had created, that you had been pushed so far away from your usual agency, I choose to interpret that score was very much part or the result of the intentionality of the technology.
Yes.
So this project is very much sort of positioned within post-phenomenology.
Yeah.
And if we talk about Aite and there is a world and so on, I'm getting sort of slowly to my, well, not a point, but perhaps a point of discussion. And that goes back to the first slide and what Pavlos brought up through bringing up Marx and the word of playground.
Yeah.
And I could assume that you will keep getting this question even at your 75 and towards the end of it.
Yeah.
But seeing that this is not composing a space, it's not a closed space. There are so many dangers of becoming a puppeteer. So what are you planning to do within your research, not merely, reciting processes? How are you wanting to analyze this further and perhaps bring that with you into the next phase, and also letting the voice of the others? And I keep hearing, actually, I don't know if that's coming from an analysis with the performers, but I'm hearing statements that I as a performer actually do question whether they're right. Like there was a heated moment where you were saying, no, there are all these dynamics of embodiment and embodied states, hexes, so on, and our cognition. So, okay, I've brought in the whole gallery here. I'm throwing it in there.
But you saw, Charlotte, you saw very right. I mean, because the research project regarding this piece is a shared research project that I have with Mauricio Carrasco, the performer that you see, the guitar player who is also a researcher. Yeah, it's not giving the place, is that mine as is of the performers that are playing it, there is, and there is, I am like a fish in the water, and you never you forget that you are in the water. I was raised in a system on which, yes, you have this division of roles between performer and composer. I was educated like that. And within this process, it's not the first time, of course, that I that I think about that, but in this particular, there was a lot of topics and problematics raising. So this phrase, interpreter and trouble, is a Mauricio's one. It's him that declares that he was in trouble at the beginning doing the piece. I was in trouble the first time that I gave the score, but once that I accept that, I was very happy, actually. There was kind of a sense of a realization. I don't know why exactly, but it was difficult because, of course, there is always this question regarding in our relationship of musicians, this question of power. Okay, this question of that we are over you, and what is your agency and what you can do. I mean, it was one. I think that I remember Ravel saying, or I don't know if it's true or not, but my piano teacher saying me, "Oh, you are playing true rubato here," and you know that Ravel tells that the best interpreter is the interpreter that plays the notes that I wrote. And that was a phrase that it was, I don't know, I don't think that was the first piano teacher that And it was the interpreter that told that. Okay?
Yeah. Just say one small sentence there, which goes back to what Mike said before. I won't take much time. I think there is an artificial dichotomy between what you are trying to do there with performers and, of course, as a composer, and to basically all the rest and what you define as education, tradition. I think that those are very hot topics for any sort of complex music, complex not in a sense of written complex, but complex as a complex dynamic system. Every music making, to my mind, and I have worked a lot to show that, is a complex dynamic system that has to be addressed in those terms. So in that sense, this piece has nothing different to any other in this very, very ecologically informed, let's say, sense. But you had a question, and I think it might be relevant to the sort of...
I think it was your reply that was sort of prompting me to think about the results that we already have, for example, within artistic research. That is, of course, I know that you're describing like the gatekeeping system, which we are doing this within, you know, and finding our ways. I find it interesting that your colleague uses the word interpreter. I never use that word personally. That is also a political stand. I don't interpret, I collaborate, and we've already had the results showing the poesis on the performer side in these sort of collaborative relationships. But I still want to drag it back to it, and I'm actually, I think it's an interesting point of discussion. We do play, but and it's stemming back to a discussion that was taking place a couple of years back, actually in Ghent at the Orpheus Institute, where there were heated discussion about, can we actually use the word playfulness? And there, hence, I'm thinking about the word playground. Is it viable, actually, in our times? And giving the already given results from a lot of research projects, you know, playground from whom? You know, what playground? I just want to bring it up as a topic of discussion, because I think it's...
well, and this particular word was used in the context of defining the composable space, so no in the context of this piece. So he bring it the same word back in the research project that we are...
But you have it on the front slide when you're introducing...
What I introduced my general thesis. It must be defined if we are...
It sounds so light, but it's a very heavy term eventually, somehow.
It's very
paradoxical. Yeah.
Well, it must depend. To me, it depends on how I will delimitate my work and the collaboration with others. Because you as a performer or collaborator, of course you work by yourself, but you are, you totally, there is a big chunk of your activity that is being with others, no? When you play, of course. Not me. It's a part. It's not the biggest part. The biggest part, I am alone working.
Yeah, but still, because of your embedded cognition, and it's nested, your cognition is
of
nested,
course.
You're always actually in contact. So although you're alone in a physical space, you're always working in connection to...
Yeah, of course. But of course it's nested, and we have the representation, but it is a playground. What we're defining, it is easy to define the whole system on which we are interacting. Everybody, I don't know. It is a playground. No, maybe not. It's not a playground.
Okay,
It could be a war zone sometimes. It depends. The question is that digital technology today which is accessible to a lot of people, change very fast a lot of things in our in the world, no? In our field, also. Sorry, I got lost.
No problem. I like very much. So this is the
No,
feedback.
because
This is the Larsen effect
No.
in our.
No, because sorry, I got it again.
No.
There is a lot of in this one. One of is the relationship that we have between collaborators, between performers and composers, which it was always critical, no? I guess, but some things wasn't spoken a lot time ago, or wasn't theorized. I don't know. I don't know, but it wasn't the same.
It's a huge field of research. Actually, the hierarchical relationships or not between composers and performers. But I liked very much where it was going through the notion of play and what is play and what is game. And there are a few references I want to make and to give you, a way out of that. For example, a very nice reference I have for the play, for the notion of play, is from Bateson. And he describes a very famous example, which I've read in Brian Mastumi, the philosopher What Animals Teach Us About Politics.
Yeah.
And he describes the difference between two animals playing and how that differs from actually fighting. So they imitate fighting by nipping their necks not as hard, so it's an imitation, it's a meta-commentary, it's a sort of metacognition, actually. It's metacognitive action, the play. So it's getting ready to really fight, but through something which is the testing phase. So this is a way to define play, actually, which is very... So would you say that you're testing the waters, you are exploring in order to go to something which will be the real fight? To
I don't know.
L'extension du domaine de la lutte.
De la lutte, yeah. Sorry, I sorry, but my all this seminar that it wasn't focused on this particular word. So some things I don't know how to respond to you.
But I think this word captures a lot from your own experience with the piece. It's vital because it encapsulates actually all your lecture and all that you have shown here. Yep. And I think it's amazing that you use this word. Yeah. And this word can be invested with many meanings. Because this is one definition of play. Another definition of play in game theory, it could be something totally different.
Yeah, yeah.
It could be really some sort of Xenakis-like battle already there. So there are many ways to look at the playground. The playground is not such a
but you choose
self-explanatory.
You choose Gregory Bateson. I think that is not a coincidence. No?
Why?
No, I mean, if you
choose to quote just in my mind. I'm writing something on ludic musical.
But I mean, we are talking about feedback, and of course, the ecological approach is normal to link it.
It's
of
like
course, but there is also the question. I was mainly thinking also about this question of the player and how he interacts with the tools and the machine, the instruments, if you want. And I am sometimes the question of motion captation, and the rest, and how we are, how I perceive that we are addressing it, is the thing that we were discussing. That we were in the discussion. I am always because I need to know more, maybe, no. But I have this kind of I feel untrustful to this approach of the prosthesis on bodies. I don't get it maybe right now, but I have this sensation of superhuman behind that.
Okay.
On
That's
some of this approach, so that the final body of the performer is a super body with a lot of technology within.
Are you thinking of, like, where is again, just like where is the word superhuman coming from?
Easy sensation. Maybe no, I don't must to mention a sensation. No, but by seeing some pieces with a lot of digital technology onto the body, and a body which sometimes has so many.
Like a cyborg.
Mm-hmm.
Like a cyborg.
Yeah.
So
I didn't want. I know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to quote something because I know there is some limitations, and that there is big topics there, big hot topics, and some of them I don't have an answer. I don't even have some questions, proper questions of some of it.
But that's important because so your work positions itself against this superhuman as you decide.
There is a question of fragility here, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, of something which is fragile.
Okay, but this fragility could exist also in a superhuman situation because very often these sensors we might be using are very, very untrustworthy or give chaotic effects or indeterminacy or in new complexity, for example, you get someone like Klaus Karl Hübler who explored all these sort of parallel impossible actions that are indeterminate. Michael Edward Edgerton has written the best book on voice and vocal techniques that are really fragile. So there are many ways to get, this fragility. And I'm, to be honest, I have hardly met people like musicians, either performers or composers, who would be advocates of a superhuman extension.
Nobody, but and I think at
so
the end,
I'm wondering about.
I don't know, but our real relationship with with the world in general, with technology in particular, is always way more fragile than we think as humans.
Absolutely.
We have this positivistic credo that we can't, so we can manage technology, and so we can. I mean, we think nature as a addition of resources that we can manage, but then we have this ecological catastrophe that is telling us, no, you don't manage this relationship. Your place in this relationship is not central. You are not the master of that. You are in a relationship in which you think that you are a master, and you are provoking your own extinction. No, I'm maybe saying slogans, but of course it is within all of these things. But it is in research. I prefer to address some things on which I can maybe not reproduce some of the thinking of the great authors on research or in other fields, on artistic research or in other fields that sometimes are reduced to slogans.
No. I think that the real, if you like, question here for research is to never be reduced to anything or to never finalize some sort of final statement, because there's always, especially in artistic research, it's
for that I am avoiding some things, but when you are discussing, there are some words that come, and you are defining these things, so and it's impossible to avoid them. But yes, sorry. The thing that it emerged also was this, because we were talking with the collaborators in the process. Yeah, and there were, for saying in a plain word, one time rather the violin player said, "Oh, I just studied in a Soviet system for 20 years, and I rise with this kind of work, and I'm doing that with my trombone." And I say, why I studied 20 years for arriving here? So even in this context of joking, this question of the sensory motor prediction and this situated interaction that arise, because they are troubles, they are perturbances. And until now, we are just testifying that in the research. We are trying to seek approaches and methodologies. Well, one of the methodologies of it could be auto theory or autoethnography, because we are giving this testimony of this particular process on this particular piece, which of course refers as things to, it could be, it can refer to other pieces that are dealing with similar stuff, of course, but we are talking about this piece and about this process and how we live it.
So along that line, are you able to talk about how you might want to do research on that piece? Because right now you're describing your point of view, but a research project ideally will question that point of view.
Yeah.
And so are you able to talk about what kind of methods you might want to use, what kind of thing you might be after in conducting research?
Well,
on
there
this?
is three
Because this
different
is
paper
like
projects.
one of the points of the...
Yeah, of course, there is three different projects. In one of them, there is this idea of giving testimony as in an autoethnographic, with an autoethnographic methodology or lens. We, as you know, were trying to seek alternatives to the embodied cognition approach.
Alternatives to the embodied cognition approach, what that
Yes.
means?
Yeah, so maybe not talk.
What's the embodied cognition approach? Because there are so many. It's
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
no,
But,
I don't know.
But
I don't know.
but what would be
I don't
an
know.
alternative to an
I
embodied?
don't know. There is. I mean, I have these ideas. It's for that we were exploring
Mhm.
post-human authors,
Mhm.
because this idea on which the anthropocentrism is no longer
Okay.
there. So there is the relationship between the human, the non-human, and the environment.
Okay.
It's a possibility. The
Mhm.
ecological approach is also other.
Mhm.
I don't know. It could be. I don't know. In any case, I don't know. I will fight over that in every in every time that I will try to do something. It's the part of it's the frustrating part of artistic research.
It was actually a very beautiful moment when I was listening to what you were playing, and what can happen with these things is that the sound object, it changes, and actually some, like the length of the sound event, or if we call it that, how it can change in these circumstances. And it made me think actually of Stefan Östersjö and his Aeolian guitar, where he actually puts his guitar into a very different sort of configuration, you could
Yeah,
say.
I don't know. I
But
never
he-
saw it.
Yeah, but he's written some about it, and he has actually used stimulated recall in that perspective to describe
Mhm.
what happens in this reconfiguration, could say. So
Yeah.
that might be, for example,
Yeah, but
an
we,
approach.
yeah, that is the thing. That the point is that you need to narrow down a little bit the topics,
Exactly.
and there is
And
so
it's the seminars.
yeah, of course, but there
Yeah.
is. I mean, it's impossible to touch a lot of
Mhm,
questions,
mhm.
Yeah.
and all of these questions raise
Mm.
others, and it's impossible to not
Mm.
refer to them.
That reminds me. Yeah.
And you can't do anything. But it was, but you know, I spent a whole year, and I have hours of recordings of talking, and I have, I don't know if gigas, but I have a lot of docs on which I wrote, sometimes notes, sometimes texts. But at the end, we don't have anything definitive.
So maybe
Mhm.
part of the process we're sharpening it as we speak.
Of course, of course. But it's for that that when it's very fugitive sometimes. It's very, when you think that you are narrowing down one thing, it's shifting to another and creating other networks of problems, no?
Yeah, and that can be very fertile. I mean, I don't necessarily see it as a problem being fugitive, but trying to capture this sort of movement, inner movement and
Yeah.
outer movement, that's and register it and then frame it and turn it into knowledge. That is the objective of artistic research or research
Yeah.
creation, or how one would like to name it. Actually, when I hear you talking about that, I remembered of this roboticist Rodney Brooks, who said the famous motto, "The world is the best representation of itself." Eventually, you know, you have a thing there, you have which somehow evades at this point, really evades even, you know, some sort of description or modeling, or and that in itself is not a problem.
We just keep coming back to Husserl, but but there is still mental images. Well, yes, that is there is the difficult part is always because I felt at the beginning of this year that both activities start to feedbacking, and until now it wasn't the case. But it's not always the case. Sometimes they are dichotomic. I feel that there is a dichotomy between my artistic activity and the other. But as Mike told me often, when we are creating or doing art, we are doing research, no? So in order to compose, I need to do research. So it's the most part of them is maybe known. There is a big part of non-verbal. Well, there is always talking or words, but it is not. I mean, I can respond some things. I will not say unconsciously because I am conscious, but there is some stuff that my answer is on in the pieces itself. And when you ask me, how was your expectation of that? I don't know. All these ideas emerged after, when I was playing, and when I having this resistance of my own creation and my own relation to the others involved on the process.
Would you even consider involving actually the audience, the reception part, in your research, like making a study of how listeners respond to those ideas? Because that would be an interesting way to get away from either the first person descriptions, which are your descriptions, or the second person's intersubjective descriptions with your performers. Maybe ask, you know, the listener of this
Yeah,
situation.
normally it's a thing that I must to pass through a lot of ghosts and truthful stuff. Normally, no.
These are things that Kent and I will continue to refine with him, because there's also the thing of doing measurements. So the surveys are one approach.
It's not a thing that is very sexy to me, making surveys. It's not really, but
are we perhaps sort of starting to go into, because usually there is a continued discussion afterwards, and I can just see that it's 3 o'clock, so I can feel that it's starting to go into that direction.
Yeah, let's call it, maybe with the last example, so we can finish with music and no words. this is the last one.
So that was
From this one is two, yeah,
that was the very
the
next.
east, yeah. Okay, thank you.
One instrument is much louder than the other.
In this mix,
in
no,
this mix.
no, it's not the instrument. Actually,
It's- it was,
it's the
really
ring
the-
modulation.
Okay.
After this performance, I changed a lot the balance.
Okay.
The ring modulation is less
Okay.
present, and the voice is a little bit more.
Okay.
So, any more? Are we done?
Do we have any questions from our
No.
virtual audience?
questions.
No, there is
No
no question for the audience, so
Okay.
maybe we will call it.
Okay, so
Thank you so
thank you very
much.
much.
Thank you. Bravo to you.